The Power Moms Network, empowering moms to lift the world.
Welcome. I'm Riley Karsh.
I'm Tova Kopan.
We are thrilled to bring you the We Go Boldly podcast.
Let's talk big burning questions, life changes, and maybe a bit of personal business.
Let's be bold and brave together. Are you ready?
I am. Here comes the show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to We Go Boldly, the podcast where we celebrate women stepping into their power and living their most authentic lives. We are thrilled to be a part of the Power Moms Network. At Power Moms Network, we are empowering moms and creating a community of mothers mentoring other moms to greatness. It is a fantastic, fun, joyful place to be. We would love to have you over there. Please, please, please check it out when you have some time. It is a cool group of women. So with all of that being said, I'm going to say hello to Tova, and I'm going to have her talk to us a little bit about something we have going on, our weekly women's circle, and get her on the show, and let's see how she's doing. So welcome, Tova. How are you?
I am good. I am still excited about the Philadelphia Eagles being the Super Bowl champions. I will continue to be excited all year long.
Absolutely.
And I'm excited about our weekly women's circle. If you are listening to this episode the day it comes out, it's never too late for you to join our weekly women's circle,
No.
but it is also not too late for you to join our women, no, let me get this right, vision board, storyboard, vision board night of fun on the 20th, Thursday the 20th. So you can head over to our website and sign up and register there to join us. I think at 7:30 Eastern time.
Yes.
And so I haven't exactly figured out my goal for the vision board, my vision board that I'm making, if it's going to be supporting my word of the year or if it's going to be supporting my sort of, I don't know, vision of the year. I don't know which direction I'm going to take with it, but I'll figure it out. But if you're listening on Wednesday or Thursday, the day this comes out, you are still in luck. There's still time for you to join us. And there's always time for you to join our community of wonderful women. I was just before we got on, I was just talking to Riley about a community organization that's starting in my town, but I know not every town is as unfortunate as the village that I live in. And sometimes it's hard to find women that are both maybe like-minded, but also get you to continue to have a growth mindset. It's a balance, right? You don't want to be stuck in your bubble. This is leaning into the conversation we're going to have today.
Mm.
It's nice to be comforted by people who share your values, but it's also nice to be pushed outside of your comfort zone. And that's a hard balance to have, but I feel like it's one that we have in our women's circle. So
Yeah, for sure.
we
Um,
invite you to join us.
Yeah, you can find out more on our website at goboldlyinitiative.com/weekly circle and sign up anytime. We would love to have you join us. Today we are continuing our conversation about writing your own story and self-authorship and how you can be the person who sort of drives the bus. I don't know. We're off the boat and we're driving the bus today. But you can be in the driver's seat of your life. You can make these kinds of decisions that impact the direction your life is going. We are spending some time before we dive into our interview season about talking about like what does it actually mean to write your own story and what are sort of some of the components of that process? What do you need to have? And today we're talking about resilience. We've talked about this on the show before. If you've ever read anything by Brene Brown, you've heard all about resilience. And so maybe it feels repetitive to some. It is, however, I think extremely important to focus on how resilience allows you to not only write your own story, but to edit it and to change it and to
Yeah.
take it in a different direction and to be the person you want to be, right? And so resilience is one of those tools in our toolkit that allow us to be the author of our future. So let's dive into our topic and kind of maybe have some definitions and a starting place, and we'll see where we go from there.
Yes, we do have definitions. And there's a variety of definitions. The most consistent definitions, I saw a lot of like bouncing back definition, which I don't
Mm,
totally love, but that seems to be the favorite. But the capacity to bounce back from disasters, change with the instances, and undergo within the face of difficulty, undergo challenges within the face of difficulty. Also, the ability to adapt well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats, or significant sources of stress. One thing I like about this concept of resilience is that it can be cultivated. It can be something that you can grow.
yeah.
And as we have talked about, as we're this concept of writing your story, writing your story is something that you can do both like looking back on your life and kind of almost rewriting and seeing how things that you thought were one way were really another way.
Yeah.
Um, but it's also something that you can continually change how the future is going to be with how you change how you react to stress or how you react to trauma. And I think it means it's also, if you have experienced something traumatic, or if you're going through the grieving process, you can cultivate your resilience and you can work on your coping skills so you can change how you are experiencing that trauma and experiencing that grief, even if it's something that happened in the past. So it is not something that you're like stuck with. Like, this was my reaction to it, and that's going to always be my reaction to it.
Yeah, I also really like that there is a lot of scientific data around
Yeah.
resilience. And there's a lot of knowledge with respect to how the brain works in this kind of arena, right? How it reacts and how it, like you're saying, how you can cultivate resilience. It's not just like, oh, you have to change the way you think. It is, you can change the way your brain is processing things so that you become more resilient. Now, that requires like a lot of work, right? It's not just you're like, oh, I'm going to change my brain's pathways today. But your ability to adapt and change and kind of, I don't want to say roll with the punches because that feels icky, but like to roll with the
Well,
punches, to accept what's happening while also reaching for something else, or that maybe you want to change something, or doing those things, and to be faced with stress and like chronic stress and adapt to the experience such that you become more resilient, right? And then your brain actually becomes physically more resilient.
well, and I think recognizing that there are going to be ups and downs, like
Mm,
that, that it's not all ups, that there will be up, that life is going to have ups and downs. I saw a tweet the other day and said something along the lines of like, when I was a kid, my mom or adults always said, if it's not one thing, it's another. And then I became an adult and I realized if it's not one thing, it's another.
yeah.
Like, it's completely accurate. And just to highlight what you were saying, Riley, like, not to throw around big words that I may or may not be able to say, but from a neurological perspective, and I'm quoting an article here, resilience is closely tied to the brain's plasticity, its ability to adapt and change in response to experiences. So when we face stressful situations, our brains activate various regions, including the amygdala, which is responsible for emotional processing, and the prefrontal cortex, which is involved in decision making and emotional regulation. Resilient individuals tend to have stronger connections between these regions, allowing for more effective emotional regulation and stress management.
Yeah,
And
well, and you see this in like a traumatic brain injury, right? And not to get too deep in the weeds of the science of it all, but like in a traumatic brain injury, people oftentimes, especially if the prefrontal cortex is impacted, struggle with emotional regulation, struggle with stress management, and all of the, that's where you see a lot of the personality changes that are associated oftentimes with a traumatic brain injury. And I think so the reason I guess I wanted to bring this up and talk about this, not only is it because it's in Tova's outline, which is awesome, but like it, I think it brings some level of comfort to know, right, that there's science here, there's data here. You can look at your reactions and think about like, okay, I'm reacting to stress in this way, right? Like I'm not getting back to, and this is the next section you have in here. I'm not getting back to that like baseline state of being after a stressful event. So what can I do to help me reset, complete the stress cycle, whatever it is, and get back to that baseline? Because once I get there, then my brain is going to get stronger, right? Because it's going to recognize this is where we're going to get every time. This is what we want to like process through. And there are things you can do to get back to that baseline state, even when it's incredibly stressful. You can meditate, you can use affirmations, you can get a therapist, you can be medicated if you need to be medicated. There are like so many ways you can help yourself reset and get through the stress cycle and complete it so that you can get back to that baseline that allows you to become more plastic in your
right.
brain, right? The plasticity of your brain. um I think it's exciting. Like I'm nerding out obviously, but like I do think it's exciting that you have this ability. Like the brain is like amazing, and you have these abilities to improve your brain quality, um which will then improve your life. So I don't know, I think it's cool.
Yeah, and we talked about how there are always situations where you are not, you're going to have to make choices, and you might be making choices between two bad choices. Like it's a Mad Lib situation
Yeah,
where you are making two bad choices and emotions are running high. And so to be able to figure out how to manage the stress of the situation and lower the temperature of the situation, um, can be incredibly important. And it can be something as, as you were saying, like overall stress management, where you have meditation built in to the to your day, or your journaling, and you've built in things, you've built in exercise, just things that keep the baseline stress lower. But it can also be things like taking deep breaths,
right.
right? And it can be like a number of different articles mention this, and there was apparently a study in 2016 that said researchers found individuals who were able to take on a third person point of view demonstrated less intensity in both negative and positive emotions in a relation to a situation. So you can kind of lower the volume on the intensity of the emotion. So if you and I spoke about this
Yeah.
right before we went on, and we got too excited. We were like, no, no, let's hold this conversation for when we're recording.
Yeah.
But
Yes.
if you talk to yourself in the third person, and you say, okay, Tova, like, what do I need to do here? How do I need to make this decision? But don't say I, say, what does Tova need to do? And you say, Riley, you said you do this
I do it all
sometimes.
the time, and I had no idea that it was like a good thing to be doing. To be perfectly honest, I was like, "Oh, I'm talking about myself in the third person. This is gross." But I was an athlete, and also I've always been a runner and an exerciser and all of those things, and I don't always love the process of exercising. And I know I've been in those circumstances, and routinely, and then also through the process of rehabbing my knee and getting myself back to, speaking of baseline, back to a baseline. um I talk to myself in the third person all the time. And and I'm in my head going, okay, Riley, let's just do one more rep. And then after that, it'll be a break time or whatever. And I do it also with my kids. Like, when you're on your last nerve and you're like, I'm going to start screaming at my kids. I don't want to scream at my kids, but like they're being monsters. And I've not always successfully, but oftentimes have been in my head and talking to myself in that third person voice about like what's happening and the consequences, and do I want to like lose my temper, and all of those things. And it is extremely effective, and I can't recommend it enough. And if you can get over the idea that you're talking about yourself in the third person, which is weird and feels awkward and like sort of like gross, because when you're like talking to somebody and they talk to you about themselves in the third person, you're like, ew. That's
Yeah, maybe
it.
keep this conversation inside your
Yeah,
head.
like you definitely keep it in your head. Although my PT has heard it several times, and she's been lovely about it, thankfully. Um, but yeah, no, I think it's super effective, and it's simple. It's not, you don't need any equipment. You don't need somebody to walk you through it. You just do it in your own head. Um, and that's probably the part about it I love the most, that you can just kind of like, you don't have to do anything to do it. It's just all you.
We need to take a quick break. I do want to talk a little bit more about why you may want to keep those, super high emotions lower as you're, you know, dealing with situations. And obviously we want to keep the negative emotions not as low. And I apologize in advance because there's going to be a Super Bowl story here, but we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back.
Well, hey there, Dream Chaser. Are you ready to make the next 12 months of your life unforgettable? Introducing the Year of You, a groundbreaking new goal system group that's about to redefine the way we approach personal growth. Join us with a community of like-minded individuals committed to unlocking their full potential. With expert guidance, personalized strategies, kind-hearted accountability, and a supportive network, the Year of You is more than just a goal-setting group. It's a whole movement. Don't just dream about it, achieve it. Click in the link in our show notes, or go ahead and visit us at goboldlyinitiative.com/year of you to learn more today. Let's embark on a transformative journey together towards becoming the best versions we can be. The Year of You, where your goals become reality.
Okay, so welcome back. So we are recording this the week of the Super Bowl. So last night I watched the mic'd up version of the Super Bowl. And if you don't know, a number of players, I don't know during the Super Bowl if it's all the players, but quite a few players wear mics. And so they will then put a compilation of the game together and you'll get to hear what the players are saying on the sidelines and stuff. And there were a number of situations that I had been wondering, like, what are the players saying?
Right.
And at the beginning of the game, the Eagles were charging down the field, and there was a penalty called against one of the Eagles players, and it got everybody up in arms. And I was like, you saw the players on the sidelines, and I was like, I wonder what's going on. And if you watch sports, you can watch things go sideways really fast when teams get upset. Like
Mm-hmm.
they can let one call, whether it's a good call or a bad call, or a missed kick, or just momentum really
Yeah.
matters.
Yep.
And that being said, it only matters if teams let it matter,
Right.
right? And so on the sidelines, after there was this call, another player who wasn't involved in the call, he's going around and he's putting his hands on, go on YouTube so you can see me, but he's like kind of putting his hands as he's like lowering the emotions, and he's just like, okay guys, we're just gonna keep it here, we're gonna keep it here. And then he went up to the player who had the penalty and he's like, it was a good play, it was a good play. And multiple players went up to him and said it was a good play. But he went on, he's like, we're just gonna stay down here, we're gonna stay here, like we're not gonna let the negative emotions get high. And then later during the game, as the Eagles defense was just being wild, And as the offense was scoring crazy points, um, and they were kind of running away with it in the first half, he was doing the same thing. He's like, we're going to keep it here. We're going to keep it here until there's 0-0 on the board. We're going to keep it here. And once again, I'm putting my hands like up near my chest. Like it didn't matter if it was negative or positive emotions. They wanted to keep them even.
Yeah.
And there is even a point where there was a group of defensive players and they all took a deep breath together. They literally said, all right, we're going to take a breath. And they all breathed in together and breathed out together because it was like if they would have gotten too full of themselves, if they would have gotten too much, like they could have let anything get in their heads. Like
Yeah.
it's a head game, right? And they could have let the negative emotions go one way. They could have let the positive emotions. If you watch sports, you see it happen. And we were watching the game and you watch the second half and Patrick Mahomes comes out and he has a great throw. And I'm like, oh my God, here we go. Here's the comeback. And the very next play, the Eagles, I don't know if they sack him or something, but my kids were like, there goes the momentum from that one play because it didn't matter, right? Like
Right.
and my point is, um, the Eagles clearly had the mindset and the coping skills to say, we're not going to let our emotions get too high or too low. Like they did the work. They did the physical work, obviously,
Yeah.
but they also did the mental work to be resilient so that no matter what the game threw at them, because whether it was expected or unexpected, they had done the steps to keep so that they could keep bouncing back. And I think
Yeah.
it's important to bounce back from the positive and the negative. There's there's lots of reasons that Super Bowl teams don't go back often the year after a Super Bowl. And there are legitimate reasons, which a lot of times they can't afford to keep the players, but there are also the mental reasons. It's hard from a positive emotion perspective. It's hard to bounce back sometimes from the highs of something really positive.
Yeah, well, I mean, even just taking it out of the sports world, like if you think about, like you hit some great success that you have been aiming for, you want to get there, you have it, you hit it, you reach it, you get that thing. There's a letdown afterwards, right? There's
Hmm.
like I reached the top of the mountain. Now what? There's that feeling of like, what's next? Or like, how do it like, was it really worth it sometimes, right? Like I don't want to be cynical about it, but there is almost always like if you don't stop to intentionally celebrate your success and be like, okay, I did it and this is great and I'm going to be happy about it, there can be a like, and even if you do that, I think there can be a big letdown factor after if you allow yourself to get so caught up in it, right? Which is not to say you shouldn't have big feelings. Like I think that we need to be cautious here in how we're talking about it because people have big feelings and
Yeah.
that's okay, right? Like you can get really mad, you can get really happy, you can have your big feelings. Just understanding on the flip side of that what those big feelings can lead to or create in you and how you sort of manage the after effect of those big feelings, whether it's depression, whether it's frantic behavior, whether it's like some combination of all of those things. There can be that after effect that you need to kind of be cognizant of and aware of. I think I want to talk about, because I think it's important, I want to talk about the components of resilience.
Yeah.
Um, and you have several here, and I'm just going to list them out and then we'll sort of dive into them. But according to science and scientists and people who do science, the components of resilience are belonging, perspective, acceptance, hope, humor. I think those are incredible, right? Like, what a great life if your life is filled with belonging, perspective, acceptance, hope, and humor. I will take that any day of the week. That sounds amazing. Um,
Yeah.
so when we're talking about building resilience, these components are sort of necessary parts of the whole. And I think, we've talked about belonging at length here on the show. Just to remind everyone, belonging is not fitting in. Belonging is feeling like you are a part of something where you can be your whole self. Um, Regardless of what everybody else is like, right? Like you can be whoever, however you are. And fitting in is changing yourself to meet the needs of the group. So I think, I mean, I don't know if you have something to add to that, Tova, but
No, I mean, just that we are in dark days. I
yeah,
mean, we really are in dark days. And I'm trying to binge watch TV shows and read books that are keeping me from having existential crisis, so I don't
yeah.
acknowledge the dark days. But it is dark.
Hmm.
And I think community is so important and finding your community.
Yeah,
Um, and not ignoring what is going on because we can't ignore it. That's how we get here and that's how we stay here, right?
yeah,
So ignoring it is not an option. But I do think that finding community is so important. And we are big fans of getting outside of your comfort zone, but that is not the same as like making sure you have a place where you belong.
yeah.
Like you need to do both of those things.
Yeah, and the truth of the matter is it doesn't have to be a big group that you belong
Yeah.
to. You don't have to belong with hundreds of people. I don't feel comfortable in big groups. It makes me itchy. And so it could be, two friends that you've made in the last few years where you're like you can get together and have brunch or go for a walk or whatever,
Yeah.
and when you do those things, you bring your whole self to the experience, right? You are whoever you are out there and it's cool and you like everyone's happy about it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
which, is not to say we don't have flaws. We do, but
Um, I, one thing we're going to talk a little bit more, so I don't want to, we don't need to focus on right now. I will, because we're going to talk a lot about perspective, at the end. So
Mhm.
I don't think we need to focus on it too much. Um, I don't think I've shared my word of the year, but my word of the year is hope. And, you know, I I haven't written it up yet. I haven't talked about it, but I like the last line that I typed up here in this article that I found, which said, "Hope is more than optimism. It is holding this deep trust that better days are ahead." And that's kind of, I think having hope, especially when the days are dark,
Mm.
takes a lot of courage and takes a lot of like, I don't know, gumption or something. And it's not a, to me at least, it's not like a weak kind of soft word. It's
Yeah.
it's a strong word filled with fortitude, like that probably requires a lot of work, but it's the thing that keeps you going, right?
Yeah. I don't think you can be a hopeful person if you're not being intentional about it, right?
Yeah.
Especially now. Well, I mean, maybe you can if you're somebody who thinks that everything is great right now. But if you are somebody who is struggling and who is impacted by the truly horrendous decisions being made on a daily basis, then it's hard to be hopeful. You have to work
Yeah.
for it. And sometimes it feels bad to be hopeful, like you're cheating. Um, and I think acknowledging that and continuing anyway is really important, right? Like, I know for me, like, sometimes I'm like, how can I even have any hope when all this crap is happening and all these people are suffering and, I'm suffering. And on the flip side of that, how can I not be hopeful,
Right.
right? Like,
Like, what's the alternative?
yeah, if I'm not hopeful, then I'm in despair and
Yeah.
I'm not doing anything for anyone at that point.
And I don't think you can be resilient if you're stuck in despair. I'm
Right.
not saying that you can't have moments of despair, right?
Yeah.
Like, obviously.
I had probably 15 this morning. Like it
But
happens.
because you're resilient, you powered
Yeah, yeah.
through. Or you felt, I don't, powered through seems dismissive,
I
but
had
you,
conversations with myself in the third person and
yeah.
decided not to be despairing anymore.
There we go. But I think that, you know, if you are truly resilient, it's you're not going to stay in that state of despair.
Well, you can't, right? That's the like that horrible bounce back phrase, right? Like you bounce back from it, right? You have these moments where you're like, I literally cannot believe this is the world I live in, that people are calling people illegal, that people are like so blatantly racist, that like all of these things are happening, and you're going, I'm not surprised because people have shown us who they are. Like there's no
Yeah.
surprise. There's just horror, right? There's just disgust and exhaustion and all of these like heavy feelings. And so the way I get through that, and the way I know you do, Tova, is to find something to be hopeful about, to believe that this will not last forever. And that's not, we say this because I strongly dislike when people do this. That is not loving and lighting it away. We're not going to just wish it away. That's not how it works. You have to be active. You have to work against it, all of those things. And it's really important to just keep saying that to people,
Yeah.
because one, people need to know you're an ally. And two, people need to know that they can't just sit on their butts and think it's going to get better for them, because it's not.
No, I mean, you and I are both doers,
Yeah,
right? So one of the ways that we deal with our despair is not just talking to ourselves in third person, which I need to do more of, to be honest. I need to follow your lead.
I feel like we're going
Um,
to be texting in third person soon.
I think so. I think like, and as soon as this episode is over.
Right.
Um, but I'm a doer, right? So I before we hopped on our call, I was having a call with somebody, and we were, I was stressing about the AP not being, allowed to,
Right.
be in the Oval Office because they won't call it the Gulf of America, which feels okay, but apparently it's not. And then I was talking about Ukraine, and there are things that are out of my control. Like those things are not directly in my control. But one thing is when we get off this episode, I can call my members of Congress
Right.
and I can share with them the things that are bothering me. And then I can lean into the organizations in my community that are encouraging other people to get engaged. And, I can figure out what I can do
Yeah.
and
Well,
how I
and
can.
if you're feeling petty, you can go to Google Maps and report it as being, wrongly labeled,
Yes.
which is
And
fun.
just to be clear, when you go on the Apple Maps, if you put in Gulf of Mexico, it comes up.
Yeah.
But if you put in Gulf of America, it also comes up. And if you put in like Texas and Florida, it's Gulf of America. So they're kind of like playing both
Mm,
sides, and I'm not a fan of that.
yeah.
Pick a lane, my friend. Pick a lane and make it be the lane without the Nazis in it.
Yeah, please.
Um, so there are two other components. We've talked a lot about acceptance,
Yeah.
which I think we could we could have a whole episode about acceptance. But I just want to highlight that it doesn't mean it means kind of what we literally just talked about, which is figuring out what is and isn't in your control.
Right.
And it is not about getting over things, but it really is, experiencing what you need to feel and and continuing on. And then humor, we can talk about this more, but laughter is incredibly important.
Mm-hmm.
It just like actually laughing, like the
Yeah.
actual physical act of laughing. I know I just said it three times, three different ways, but I want you to process that. It is really, really important to have that release in your body.
Mm-hmm.
It is good for you physiologically to laugh.
Yeah.
So, whatever will make you laugh, if you need to do it in the privacy of our own home because it's like really absurd YouTube videos, then have at it.
Yeah.
But find something that makes you laugh.
Yeah, and I've read a lot of this lately, and I agree with it. The idea that being joyful and finding joy and things, being hopeful and laughing and all of those things are acts of resistance, right? Like
Mm,
those are acts of resistance to whatever else is going on around you, and to even to yourself, right? Like it's an act of resistance to yourself, to that part of yourself that wants to dive into despair, that wants to like give up, to walk away, all of those things. It's an act of resistance all around. So I think it's, it's definitely worthwhile. We need to take another break. So why don't we do
Mhm.
that? And when we come back, we will talk about perspective a bit more, I think. So
Yeah.
we will be right back, everyone.
Hey there, pod family. Have you ever wished you could stay in the loop with a little slice of transformation and inspiration delivered straight to your inbox? Well, you're in luck because now you can. Introducing our fantastic newsletter, your VIP pass to all things exciting and informative. Join our community of growth minded souls. Get the hottest topics delivered right to your inbox. It's quick, easy, and totally free. Just head over to our website at goboldlyinitiative.com and sign up for our newsletter today. Don't miss out on the next big thing. Stay connected with us. Subscribe now and get ready for some big, bold love.
Okay, so welcome back to the show. Before the break, we were talking about what the components of resilience and what they are. And now we're going to focus in on perspective, shifting your perspective, and sort of the who, what, why, when, how of that. Um, so Tova, I see, like, I'm looking through our outline here, and I think there are, like, 12 billion ways to shift your perspective. That's my own number, by the way. Um, and yet I think we need to talk a little bit about, like, what does perspective have to do with being the author of your own story, right? I want to bring it like
Yeah.
full circle.
So, I think that I'm glad you're saying that because I wanted to back it up for a moment and maybe talk a little bit about our inspiration for this whole idea.
Mm-hmm.
Not the writing your own story. That's been our idea for the season for a long time, but this whole idea of shifting our perspective and even resilience, which was Ina Garten's memoir.
Yeah, I can't believe we haven't talked about that yet. Yeah.
Yeah. And so we both read it at the end of last year. And if you haven't read it, I'm blanking on the name of it because I don't remember anything. Make Your Own Luck. Is that it?
No, it's something about like being ready for the luck when it shows up.
Being ready.
I will find it. You keep talking.
Okay. So it's about luck. But what she talks about time and time again in her book, and this really goes to this concept of like being able to be ready for the luck, but also
That's what it
looking
is. Be ready when the when the luck happens.
be ready for when the luck happens. There we
Mm-hmm.
go. But also, it goes to being able to look back at your life and going, oh, that wasn't actually a bad thing. That was a good thing that happened. And shifting the perspective and kind of rewriting the story that you've been telling yourself.
Yeah.
And I think this practice of the experience that we might all experience if we had the luxury to all write our own memoirs could be really eye-opening. But she had a number of times where something didn't work out, where she wanted to buy a house and it fell through, or a job, or just a variety of things that I think there was a location for the restaurant that she wanted, and then it fell through. And it happened multiple times where she would want something and it was perfect and it was exactly what she wanted. And then it didn't work out. And then the thing that was like the B option ended up being, in hindsight, the hindsight 2020 situation, significantly better.
Right.
And now, obviously, a lot of her story, the title is based on this concept of she said I was just really lucky, and Oprah calls her out and others call her out by saying like no, you like worked your butt off,
Yeah.
and that's why you were lucky because you worked your butt off. And that was obviously a big theme of this book, but another big theme that I really took away from it was if you don't take the time to reflect and look back and go, oh, I've been carrying with me that this was a bad thing that happened. I never shifted it. Like I always I always knew that we ended up in this great house and I love this house, but I always carried this sadness with me because I was really upset we lost that first house.
Yeah.
And in the end, um, not to say that it's not okay that you weren't sad, but like, I don't really need to carry that sadness with me anymore because
Yeah.
it, it actually worked out much better. That's something I can let go of. I don't need to carry that anymore.
Right. And I think this is one of the ways in which we can build resilience too in the present day is by looking in the past and going, wow, I was like really resilient then, right? Like, and the example of her not getting the house she wanted is probably not like the best for that in the sense of like, okay, cry me a river.
Yeah.
But like when you look back in your past and bad things happen and they're legitimately bad things, and it's, you can say, yeah, that was terrible. I really, that hurt. That was a hard time. That was bad, blah, blah, blah. All of those things that we say about traumatic past events, right? But
Yeah.
you can also look at those things and change the conversation in your own mind about the outcome, right? Like, was it awful? Do I hurt? Are these things sad? Yes, yes, yes. Also, and also, right? Like it's an and also, not a but. Um, and it's a way to recognize your own resilience, recognize that you
Yeah.
are adaptable, that you are capable, that you can change the way you're processing information. You can do all these things. And as you're saying, taking the time to look back and reflect is one of the ways we can grow our resilience, one of the ways we can learn to shift our perspective. Because, yeah, like there's things that have happened in my life where they were like crap and it was bad. And I'm not going to look back at those and suddenly be like, oh, that was great. But I am able to look back at those and go, okay, well, that was really horrible. And I've grown in these 10 ways because of it,
Right.
or I've been able to overcome X, Y, and Z because of it, right? Like there are, it's not a silver lining. It's a reality check of like what happened after. Like how did
Well,
I get through it all?
and to that end, like, so as you were saying, like Ina Garten, she actually did have quite a bit of hardship at the
Yeah,
beginning
for
of her
sure.
life and
For sure.
trauma. But she also was very privileged in many respects.
Yeah.
Um, and but I think a lot of the time recognizing that she had things not work out and then work out allowed her the resilience to be more of a risk taker. Like when you look back and you're like, man, it all was awful. And then I was okay. You're able to go, well, if I make this risk and it's all awful again, I do know I'm going to be okay.
Yeah.
And so I think sometimes, like as you said, like it does require the reflection though to go back. Like you can be resilient and not know you're resilient.
Yeah. I think oftentimes people are.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
let's talk a little bit about perspective. And then we do need to wrap it up for this week. I think we could talk about this forever. I mean, this is why we constantly talk about resilience because it's such an interesting and important topic. Um, so how do you get to that shift in perspective? It's all good and fine to say, "Hey, look back and reflect," but like, what does that really mean? I think there are, there's a lot of like things we've said in the past, like practicing gratitude, um, doing grounding, like thinking about, what's happening in the present moment. If you're somebody who's stuck living in the past or worrying about the future, being able to ground yourself in the present moment allows you to tune in your perspective to what's happening now versus like whatever might happen.
Yeah.
Um, so I think those are some like basic ways to shift your perspective. There's other things in here in our list here that I think are really interesting. I'll just start with asking the right questions.
Hmm.
So, um, if you are in the space and have the energy and time and all those things to reflect, asking the right questions can help you really get a different perspective on things, right? Like the list we have here, like, is this really true? Can I absolutely know for certain with no doubt at all that this is true? How do I react when I believe this thing? And who would I be without believing that thing? It's also like when you're trying to get through limiting beliefs and things about, if you have imposter syndrome or those kinds of things, taking the time to have those hard questions asked to yourself, I think is one way to sort of break through all of that and get a little bit of a reality check.
Yeah, there's another one that talks about not just reacting, but reflecting. But in that, I think can be a little confusing, but I like this concept of seeing your reactions rather than be taken over by them. So it's not that you're not going to react, but maybe giving yourself a little distance. So maybe talking to yourself in that third person and being like, "Whoa, Tova, that was a lot." Like just giving yourself a little bit of space. So it's not that you're not feeling the emotions, it's not that you're having the reaction, but you're giving yourself that space to and this is, by the way, where journaling can help
Yeah.
because you're like giving yourself the space to reflect on your reaction. But just so that you can look at the reaction and not just experience the reaction.
Yeah, I think this is a great place for that third person narrator to come in. As you said, like sometimes I'm like, Riley, whoa, what's happening right now? Right? Like it doesn't have to be that deep. You can just like call yourself out on whatever you're thinking, and it's like throwing a flag. We're gonna do football references. It's like throwing a flag on the flag. It's like
Yeah.
that's crazy. Whatever craziness just popped in your head, let's think about it, right? Like how many times during the day, I don't, maybe nobody else does this and I actually am crazy, I don't know, but like how many times during the day do you have a thought and you're like, whoa, where did that come from? And that's like bananas, and why would I even think that? um Using that third person voice helps you, one, to inflect some humor into it, as we've already
Yeah.
talked about. Like if you can laugh at yourself about it, I think that's super helpful. I do all the time. um but it also, gives you that objectivity to the conversation of like, it's not even me doing it, it's this like third person having this discussion about whatever I'm thinking and doing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think too, like not to give like especially when it relates to kids, like there's some lines that I will use over and over and they kind of know it what's when I'm like pulling myself out of like a stressful reaction. So if it'll be like, I cannot believe you guys didn't completely read my mind. And they'll, then we all laugh because
Yeah.
like they know that's when I'm like pulling myself. Or if I say to my 8-year-old, you are acting just like an 8-year-old. And it's still funny. It was especially funny when they were like 4 years old, and I'd be like, "You're
Right.
acting just like a 4-year-old," and then they'd be like, "I am 4 years old." I'm like,
Right.
"Oh, well, that explains it." But there can be certain things that you kind of use to kind of pull yourself out when you're having these reactions that are, you know, appropriate feelings, but maybe bigger reactions than you intend to have.
Yeah.
I think there's a recommendation that I saw that I kind of liked, which is for every negative, list two positives. And I think this is when you're like falling into those depths of despair situation where this is not a situation of silver lining it. And I'm not saying we're going to like look at the current administration and be like, okay, for all the one negative thing that they've done today, let's find two good things that they've done. That is not going to work. That is not what I'm saying.
No, but like, what I noticed, I was doing this, and not exactly, but I noticed, that everything blew up about Kendrick Lamar's halftime performance, which I loved. And
It was fantastic.
yeah, I think interestingly, like I could get into the depths of despair about how people are bashing it and like pretending they're not being racist about it and like doing all kinds of crazy stuff, right? Like, and that really feels icky and I don't like it and I don't want it to be happening. On the flip side of that, my social media feeds have been flooded with people being like, did you know? And like all the
Mhm.
research they've done about the performance and the layers that were in the performance, and like Google searches for 40 acres and a mule went up like some exponential percentage because people, that's history. People are actually learning.
Yeah.
So like, okay, all those naysayers and like people outing themselves as, whatever. Fine. You don't like it. You're gonna throw a temper tantrum about it. Cool. But then all these other people, and myself included, have learned like a tremendous amount of stuff that I would never have known. Right. Like, and it's opened up a dialogue that would not have existed but for that experience. So that's like a real world, real moment example of, it's not a silver lining. Those people that panned the show because they're like, I don't know, whatever, um, they're
He's a
not any
rapper and
better.
he was rapping. I
Oh,
cannot believe it.
black man being black, how dare he? Um, like, I think those people are never going to change, right? They are who they are.
Yeah.
It is what it is. We can't save them. I don't have anything good to say. Um, I don't have to dive into that though, because I can look at all these other people who are learning and who are
Yeah.
using it as an opportunity to be like, well, I didn't really understand it. But then the next day I went and did all this research and like learned about, like all the different ways things he was talking about and symbolism that existed. There's an entire course being created around the symbolism in that he put out there in the art that he made, right? Like
Yeah.
that's incredible.
No, I think
Anyway,
that
that's
is
my soapbox.
that is a great example. I think it is a great example. So yeah, so find two positives for a negative if you're going down, and that will help you quote bounce back.
Yeah.
Um, One thing, I don't know if we said earlier, which is that your brain looks for the easiest way to like make a
Mm,
decision. It looks for the most efficient way to do it. So we say this 1,000 times, we're going to say it 1,000 times more. Um, you need to train your brain to be able to handle challenges and to be able to handle new things. So get outside that comfort zone of yours, shift your perspective. It is just going to go, your brain is going to look at the thing that it has been trained to do and say, well, this reminds me of the way things always were. And so that's why I'm going to look at this halftime show and it's not what I want to see. And my favorite halftime show was, I don't know, something boring that was a band a while ago. And anything but that I do not like. And so my brain is not going to expand its mind. And so the way you can combat that is by taking yourself outside the box, get outside your comfort bubble, and your brain will be more likely to open up. That doesn't mean you have to like everything.
no.
It just means your brain will be more open to like the easiest and most efficient way to make a decision. There'll just be more pathways that are easy and efficient, honestly.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that goes towards the next one, which is become the student. For anybody who watched Ted Lasso, he talks about being curious. And that's something that he really emphasizes. And I think that's what this is going towards. Like the things that my kids come home talking about. And I forgot how much information I used to have in my head. Like, I used to know so much.
So
I
much.
know so less right now. Like, I was telling somebody about this book that I'm reading that Onyx Storm, so many people are reading. And I was telling him about these dragons and these people and the isles and this and that and this. And he was like, how do you remember all that? I was like, I got the space, man. I got the space. It's just waiting to be filled.
Yeah.
But, my kids were learning, my 11-year-old was learning about execution, and then he did this deep dive in Genghis Khan just because he wanted to, and as you did with the Kendrick Lamar halftime show, where you were like, okay, I liked it on the surface, but like I know I'm missing so much, so
Oh my
I'm going
God.
to do
Yeah.
a deep dive because I want to know more.
Right.
Like, be curious. It helps not just to make your life more colorful, and just better, but it does help you be more resilient.
Yeah, for sure. Um, so I just want to wrap it up a little bit in saying, there's a whole host of other ways to shift your perspective, to grow your resilience, to become a person who is more adaptable in the world. And, you know, I think ending it on this concept of curiosity is the right place to be, right? Because that is what is going to help you grow as a human being. The more curious you are about the world, whether you like something or not, right? Be curious, try new things, take chances, talk to somebody you've never talked to. All of that is going to lead you to writing a better story for yourself, because you're going to have more to work from. So we can't emphasize it enough. To the extent that you are able, try new things, right? Be curious about the world around you. Do we have some homework for
Well, the
for the
homework
folks this
is
week?
like, what will you do this week to shift your perspective? Like, is there something that you can do? And it can be as simple as going like, I I don't know anything about Genghis Khan, or, you know, I, when I think about it like this way, if you're reading a book and someone offhandedly mentions something and you're like, "Oh, that, um, go read something about it. Like, take an opportunity to learn, or pick up a book that's from a culture that you don't know anything about, or,
Yeah.
just shift your perspective any way you can, to get yourself outside of that comfort bubble. Or, hey, you can be like Riley, and I'm going to try to be like Riley more this week and talk to yourself in the third person. But try some of the techniques that we've talked about that can help you practice resilience and help shift your perspective. And if you really want to shoot for the stars, think about if you were writing your memoir and you want to look back at your life and think, are there things that I've always carried with me as being bad that maybe that's, I could shift that perspective. Like,
Right.
maybe I don't need to make them as being like, oh, it all worked out in the end,
Yeah.
but maybe it actually did all work out in the end. And I can say, yeah, it wasn't what I wanted, but like, it actually worked out better than I could have imagined.
Yeah, for sure. Um, all right. Well, I think we'll wrap it up there for this week. And we'll be back next week with another episode on writing your own story. And coming soon will be interviews, and you'll get to hear other people talk to you about, how they wrote their own story and how they're continuing to do so. So we're excited for that coming up in the next few weeks. But until next week, everyone, have a wonderful, wonderful time. Be resilient, be kind, don't be racist. I don't know. Be a good person. So we'll talk to you all soon.
Thanks so much for listening to We Go Boldly podcast. We know you're busy and we love spending time with you.
If you enjoyed this week's episode, let us know. Head to Apple Podcasts right now to rate and review our show. While you're there, be sure to click that subscribe button.
Want more us time? Follow us on all the socials at Go Boldly Together.
Want even more us time? As in all the coaching pizzazz. Find us at goboldlyinitiative.com for all the info.
We will be back with more excitement, research, and deep thoughts next week.
Until then, keep on being the bold, brave, amazing people we know you already are.
The Power Moms Network, empowering moms to lift the world.